The final viewing. The Turner Funeral Home was an imposing brick structure on the edge of town, untouched by time. Its reputation was known. Those who entered did not leave the same. When Aunt Mabel died, her funeral was arranged there, as tradition dictated. The funeral director, Mr. Carson, was infamous for his peculiar mannerisms and outdated ways. Yet, somehow, everyone ended up bringing their dead to his care. The day of the service, the storm outside intensified, rattling the old windows. Relatives sat quietly, draped in black, as Mr. Carson arranged the casket for the viewing. The room was cold, but what really chilled the mourners was the smell, something sour beneath the heavy scent of lilies. As the service began, people whispered about feeling watched, uneasy under the eyes of forgotten portraits of the long dead. The lights flickered, casting unnatural shadows over the rows of seats, but no one dared to leave. It was as if an invisible grip held them in place. Then, one by one, mourners approached the casket. Aunt Mabel's features seemed wrong somehow, as if her eyes had been sewn shut hastily, her skin pale and waxen in a way that made the living uncomfortable. One niece leaned in, about to whisper her final goodbye, when Aunt Mabel's hand twitched. The niece gasped, stumbling back, while others looked on in confusion. Before anyone could react, Mabel's eyes shot open, wide, glassy, and filled with something unrecognizably human. Her lips parted, and the odor in the room thickened, acrid and metallic, as her head lolled unnaturally to the side. Mr. Carson's voice rang out, oddly calm. Please return to your seats. The deceased will finish their final viewing. His face seemed amused, the corners of his mouth twitching as though he knew what would happen next. Mabel's body moved, lurching out of the casket with movements that echoed puppetry. She landed on her feet, arms rising like a marionette's as her mouth began to widen. Too wide, stretching to show rows of teeth far sharper and darker than anyone remembered. Panicked screams filled the room as Mabel advanced, her twisted form moving toward the pews. One by one, mourners tried to scramble away, but the doors had locked with a force beyond any key's power. Mr. Carson watched, his expression impassive, like he was enjoying a play. Her jaw continued to unhinge, splitting down to her chest as she whispered in a voice that sounded like cracking wood, "It's your turn to stay with me." One by one, the mourners fell silent, unable to resist her commands. The last sight they saw was her rotting hands reaching out, pulling them into the darkness, their own screams fading into the echo of thunder as the storm outside howled on. When the next morning dawned, the Turner Funeral Home stood empty once again, its doors swinging gently in the breeze. And from the faint crack in the cellar door, a new series of portraits lined the wall, faces frozen in eternal horror, forever part of the Turner family's final viewing.